that everyone to join in and clap, okay, and get into it. I think you know it. Most of you know it. 8 days a week from the Beatles, right? Okay.
Speaker, right? Who just walked in the door. Just walked in the door. So we thought we were going to go without him tonight, but Ronnie Perrette is going to offer his witness talk, his own journey.
to becoming Catholic. So, Rodney Perret.
Well, I have to admit it. I drove into the parking lot. I'm like, oh my gosh, there's a lot of people. So, but seriously, it's an honor to have the opportunity to speak to you tonight. And I want to thank Father Kevin for approaching me. He actually approached me last year, and I missed the opportunity. A little louder. Oh, sorry. Yeah, he approached me last year, but I was unable to attend. So this year, glad to have the opportunity, and I wanted to share with you my conversion story. My journey into the Catholic faith started 45 short years ago. I was born in Edina, Minnesota, as the youngest of 4 other siblings, and raised in a Protestant household. I was brought up Baptist, and we went to church every Sunday. Attended Sunday school regularly. But my dad worked for IBM, and if anybody is familiar with IBM, they were the Apple back in the 70s and 80s. We traveled, or we moved a lot. So the joke was, IBM stood for I've been moved. And I can really relate to that one. So I don't know what it was, but after moves to California and Connecticut, my parents' marriage started falling apart. So that created a lot of havoc. They separated and divorced when I was 10. My mom soon remarried, wound up divorcing again, remarried again, divorced again. So we were a pretty disjointed family. At one point I was trying to figure out what's the normality of being a family. It was at that point that I felt alone and abandoned. Everyone was pretty much out of the house. My mom was dating, my dad was gone. But it kind of was a good thing in the fact that my brother was actually a family member, a very good father figure to me. So he was very instrumental in keeping me stable. Like I said before, we had moved a lot. We settled down in Connecticut for a fair amount of time. And I dated a girl in high school that was a strong Catholic girl. She was raised in a strong Irish-Italian Catholic household. And she actually started telling me what it's like to be a family. So I went on to attend a Catholic retreat with her called Emmaus, which is a standard Catholic youth group retreat. And it was that time that I got my first taste of what Catholicism was. As with many high school romances, that dissolved and went off to college. And in the fall of 1987, I attended Penn State University in Hazleton, still considering myself a Christian, but non-denominational. Never went to church, though I still found myself praying often. Praying, especially when the times were really, really bad. And in college, there's a lot of bad ones. So I was still faithful, but just still didn't. My life still felt like I didn't have fulfillment or completeness. So my life really, truly started to change when I attended the main campus in the fall of 1989. That's where I met my future wife, Lauren, in organic chemistry lab. We started off just as friends, but grew a lot more from there. My wife is a devout Catholic. She attended Mother Catholic school through 8th grade. And being raised in a strong Catholic household, she could speak to the Catholic religion and the doctrine very well. I kind of would ask her questions and say, you go to Mass every Sunday, you have to go out to Mass every Sunday, you seem like you really have to go. And she's like, yeah, pretty much. Okay. Well, I've gone, at that point I had gone about 14 years without going to church, so that was like a shocker to me. So she was very well versed, as I said. I started asking numerous questions. Some of the myths that I was brought up believing about the Catholic religion was worshiping statues, and why do you worship statues, and why do you pray to saints? I don't understand. And why do you elevate Mary so high? You treat her like she's Jesus, and she just laughed. She took it very well, and she set me straight on many of those issues. Basically referencing that, no, we're not idolatry type of worshipers. They're mainly symbols. Tells a story, and it basically just helps reinforce the faith. So she set me straight on many things about the doctrine. It was, after we got married in 1995, we had a beautiful Catholic wedding mass in St. Michael's here. And I remember, the only thing I could remember during the whole wedding ceremony was my family is going to freak out. They didn't know what to do. First time they've ever stepped in a Catholic church. And it was so funny. The one side of the church with my family members was like 14 people. And they're just sitting there like this. And then the other side, 200 people. My wife's side, all practicing Catholics, knowing what to do. But it went off really well. So it went off without a hitch. But my interest really grew after the marriage. I really started asking more questions and attended Mass regularly every week with my wife, not being converted yet. And it was there that I really started wondering, I'm starting to feel a little more at home going to Mass every week. So it was right around that time in the summer of '97 that I definitely, everybody seems to have that revelationary moment where, maybe not lightning strikes you on the head, but you start thinking, hey, I think I found something here. And it was right about that point in '97 that I decided, yeah, I think this is the answer. And it was about the fall of '97 when I attended RCIA. And really enjoyed the meetings. The meetings and the classes were awesome. Truly educational, but the Sister Jana was actually the nun at the time that was actually heading up the RCIA program, and she was a member of the St. Francis Sisters of Millville. She played a prominent role in my faith development, as did my sponsor, Herb Nickel. Herb Nickel was one of my sponsors for my faith formation, and I thank him. I thank him very much. But he did a very good job keeping me grounded and answering questions. So basically, the best part in terms of attending the classes and learning more about the faith, that void that I had when I was in my latter childhood years, in my early 20s, I found disappeared quite well, because the sacrament of reconciliation, although it's a very difficult sacrament for converts to come to use and to lean on, it actually works well. It's a very liberating and fulfilling sacrament, so it makes you feel like the weight is lifted off your shoulders. So that and the Blessed Sacrament, receiving the Holy Communion is awesome. That actually it just is liberating as going to confession. So those two sacraments, all of them are important, but those two sacraments in terms of conversion played an important role for me. And I guess that's my story. So.
Thank you, Rodney. Thanks a lot. It's not easy to get up and tell a personal story like that, and that's That's a wonderful story. Okay, this is the third and final time, I promise. I'm going to do Father Kevin Tasty.
Rodney told me, actually, his wife Lauren told me, that the real reason why he married her wasn't because she was Catholic or because she was this faithful woman. It was because as a sports fan, as Rod is a sports fan, and specifically baseball, Lauren knew what the letters RBI stand for. That's true. That's what she told us. So good to see so many of us here this evening. I hope this is our minimum size crowd this year, as I've been continuing to promote during Masses. I hope so much that this is our minimum size crowd, but it's so beautiful to get off to a great start with everybody, with this beautiful community here in Butler. My parents made the trip up, not quite sure why, but they made the trip up, and they can attribute to the stories of the dog. Very much so. Many, many more stories there. There was a gentleman who was a parishioner. His name was John. And John was a pretty good fisherman, but he heard that their parish priest, Father Francis, was a really good fisherman. So he wanted to go out with Father Francis and learn some tricks. So he was able to get Father Francis to go on out together, and Father Francis took him to a stream, which he knew quite well and knew some really good spots on the stream. But John really was more interested, especially earlier in the day, of observing Father Francis to see what he did, what made him such a good fisherman. So Father Francis said, I'll take this spot here, John, and there's this another spot maybe 50 yards away. Just cast your line there. Easy fishing. Well, John went down 50 yards away, and he was spending most of his time focused on Father Francis and just observing him. Cast, bring up fish. And he later described it as unassuming mastery, what he witnessed Father Francis and how he fished. Just steady, quiet, rhythmic, confident. Now, he did pull up a fish every cast, but even those casts were just beautifully done. John, meanwhile, was catching nothing. Nothing at all. So after a while, he walks down to Father Francis, and he says, Father, what are you doing that I'm not doing? What is the secret? What is the trick? And Father Francis said, well, no real trick. Bait the line and find a good spot. And, well, I say a prayer before every time that I cast. Sometimes I say a Hail Mary, sometimes an Our Father, sometimes I just say my own prayer. So John went back to his spot. This time said a prayer before every cast. Nothing. Nothing at all. Grows increasingly frustrated, comes back to Father Francis and says, Father Francis, I said a prayer, I said Hail Marys, Our Fathers, Glory Bees, my own prayers, and I got nothing. And you are having a consistent day. Father Francis said, well, John, can I see your line? I said, sure. I said, can I see your hook? I said, sure. Father Francis looked at the hook and he said, John, you know you have to bait the hook. He said, furthermore, John, those prayers that I said, I was praying that you catch every fish, every cast that you make. Not that I catch all the fish. So even my prayers, John, prove that you are a terrible fisherman. Practical. Hopefully, we will, and I will be able to give you some practical tips, if you will, or examples or experiences of how to integrate prayer into every part of our lives. Every part of who we are and what we do. And certainly I'll give some tips. But rather than just listing off tips, I will share with you some experiences, my own, and other experiences that people have shared with me on their encounters with the divine in prayer. In the various and different forms and types of prayers. I can't cover all of them tonight. This is not an exhaustive session, but hopefully just bait the hook, I guess, for you a little bit, so that you'll take it and maybe run with it and go to places where maybe you've never been in your own spiritual lives before. Certainly with prayer, we have, right, most of our prayer is petitionary. We need something, we go to God. Happens probably more often than any other type of prayer. And that's fine. Or prayers of intercession. We ask to pray for somebody else, or ask somebody else to pray for us. Well and good. We're using words most of the time. Praise and worship. Thanking God for the gift of a new day. At the beginning of a day, at the end of a day. Rosaries, rote prayers, Our Fathers and Hail Marys and Glory Be's, prayers we know by heart. Prayers before meals. Priests and religious make commitment to pray what's called the Liturgy of the Hours, and anybody can pray these prayers. It's a 4-volume set of prayers that you're supposed to pray at different times throughout the day. Again, anybody can do them. But I'm going to challenge us to go a little bit deeper tonight. To go a little bit deeper into our relationship, and that's going to be a huge word tonight. Our relationship with the Lord. Our relationship with Jesus Christ. To maybe go to places we've never been in this relationship that He desires so badly for us to be in. We're busy people. But I'm going to challenge us again here tonight to look at exactly what we call busy. If I go for a walk in the neighborhood, frequently I will come across homes and there's like The Bachelor's on TV. Or America's Greatest Ninja Hero, or whatever they're called. Any type of reality television. Now, certainly there are times when we just need to be mindless and just turn on some type of mindless television program. But I'm going to challenge us, those times that we find ourselves saying we're so busy and how occupied a lot of that time is with internet and with television, wasted internet and wasted television, we'll say, to look at those moments and how much we can cut that out and paste in some form of prayer. Find cracks throughout our day. If we are so busy where we have no time to ourselves, when do we? In the shower? In the bathroom? In the car to and from work? Maybe a walk in the morning? Something like that, because every relationship requires some one-on-one time. Every relationship. And it's no different with Jesus. So yes, there is one-on-one time required. Where are we going to find that in our day will be different for each one of us. And how we are going to integrate, absorb, and live that will be different for each and every one of us as well. There are so many different definitions of prayer. So many. I'm just going to read a few. Prayer reflects our relationship with the Lord. One's style of prayer changes with the ongoing changes in relationship. And I would add, one's style of prayer changes with different seasons. Just within the seasons of life. When basketball season comes for me as a coach, an awful lot of my prayer is focused around basketball. It's focused around the team. Am I doing the right things? Am I coaching the right things? What could I have done better? And that changes with all of us and changes as we age as well. Whatever situations in life we find ourselves in. There's a priest, Father Richard Rohr, wrote that true spirituality is not a search for perfection or the door to the next world, but rather it is a search for the divine union right now. The gift of prayer is to realize that prayer is not so much about what I do in prayer moments, but what is being done to me. I'll repeat that one. Not so much about what I am doing in prayer moments, but what is being done to me. Prayer is keeping company with God who is already present. Keep that in mind, and this in mind. That the value of our prayer does not depend upon our own personal feelings. Think about that. The value of our prayer does not depend necessarily upon what we are feeling. It's allowing God to work with us, however we feel at that time. And as one becomes more familiar with the workings of the Holy Spirit in our lives, the intertwining of the mundane, the everyday, and the mystical become interwoven into everyday experiences. Lastly, this definition, one of many, 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 comes from St. Paul in Romans. It is the Spirit, prayer is the Spirit within reaching up to the Spirit above. I've heard one priest say that prayer is a long, loving look at the real. A long, loving look at the real. And indeed, our spiritual lives are real. Spiritual lives are real because our spiritual lives are primarily about what happens in our everyday lives. People say to me, Father Kevin, you preach about things that I can relate to. Because that's all I can relate to. They're everyday experiences. We don't have to look any further. We just have to look in everyday things of life. So given that prayer is real, given that life is real, prayer is a radical response to the awesome gift of life. Given that, I want to show a video that's about 10 minutes long. It is a video of a scientist, a mathematician, who is giving a conference. And there are some stunning things about this video. One of them is, here's this mathematician, this scientist, who attributes the beginning of life, who attributes life itself to divinity. He says himself, I cannot explain. We cannot explain why these things happen in the mother's womb. We cannot explain everything. We have to attribute these things to divinity. That's rare, hearing a scientist say that. So it's kind of neat to hear that. This video is very powerful. It's called From Conception to Birth. Very, very powerful. Some people have said it's graphic. It's not graphic. It's for a mature audience. Right? You're going to see the gestation process, okay, to birth. I'm going to kick that off given that definition, that prayer, one of those definitions, is a radical response to life.
I was offered a position as Associate Professor of Medicine and Chief of Scientific Visualization at Yale University in the Department of Medicine. And my job was to write many of the algorithms in code for NASA to do virtual surgery in preparation for the astronauts going into deep space flight so they could be cut in robotic pods. One of the fascinating things about what we were actually working on is that we were seeing, using the new kind of scanning technologies, things that had just had never been seen before. I mean, not only in disease management, but also things that allowed us to see things about the body that just made you marvel. I remember one of the first times we were looking at collagen, and your entire body, everything, your hair, skin, bone, nails, everything is made of collagen. It's a kind of a rope-like structure that twirls and swirls like this. And the only place that collagen changes its structure is in the corner of your eye. In your eye, it becomes a grid formation, and therefore it becomes transparent as opposed to opaque. So perfectly organized a structure, it was hard not to attribute divinity to it, because we kept on seeing this over and over and over again in different parts of the body. One of the opportunities I had was one person was working on a really interesting kind of micromagnetic resonance imaging machine with the NIH, and what we were going to do was scan a new project on the development of the fetus from conception to birth using these kinds of new technologies. So I wrote the algorithms and code, and he built the hardware. Paul Lovegrove then went on to win the Nobel Prize for inventing the MRI. I get the data. And I'm going to show you a sample of that piece from conception to birth. actually start working on this data is pretty spectacular. And as we kept on scanning more and more, working on this project, looking at these two simple cells that have this kind of unbelievable machinery that will become the magic of you. And as we kept on working on this data, looking at small clusters of the body, these little, pieces of tissue that were the trophoblast coming off of the blastocyst, all of a sudden burrowing itself into the side of the uterus, saying, I'm here to stay. All of a sudden having a conversation of communications, the estrogens, the progesterones, saying, I'm here to stay. Plant me, building this incredible trilinear fetus that becomes within 44 days something that you can recognize, and then at 9 weeks is really like a kind of a little human being. The marvel of this information, how do we actually have this biological mechanism inside our body to actually see this information? I'm going to show you something pretty unique. Here's a human heart at 25. It's just basically 2 strands. And like this magnificent origami, cells are developing at 1 million cells per second at 4 weeks as it's just folding on itself. Within 5 weeks, you can start to see the early atrium and the early ventricles. 6 weeks, these folds are now beginning with the papilla and the inside of the heart, actually being able to pull down each one of those valves in your heart until you get actually a mature heart, and then basically the development of the entire human body. The magic of the mechanisms inside each genetic structure saying exactly where that nerve cell should go. The complexity of the mathematical models of how these things are indeed done are beyond human comprehension. Even though I'm a mathematician, I look at this with a marvel of how do these instruction sets not make these mistakes as they build what is us. It's a mystery, it's magic, it's divinity. Then when you start to take a look at an adult life, take a look at this little tuft of capillaries. It's just a tiny substructure, microscopic, but basically by the time you're at 9 months and you've given birth, you have almost 60,000 miles of vessels inside your body. And only 1 mile is visible, 59,999 miles that are basically bringing nutrients and taking waste away. The complexity of building that within a single system is, again, beyond any comprehension of any existing mathematics today. And that instruction set from the brain to every other part of the body, look at the complexity of the folding. Where is this intelligence of knowing that a fold can actually hold more information? So as you actually watch the baby's brain grow, and it's one of the things that we're doing right now, we're actually doing the longitudinal studies of actually scanning babies' brains from the moment they're born every 6 months until they're 6 years old. We're going to be doing actually about 250 children, watching exactly how the GI and the sukai of the brains fold, to see how this magnificent develop actually turns into memories and the marvel that is us. And it's not just our own existence, but how does the woman's body understand to have genetic structure that not only builds her own, but then has the understanding that allows her to become a walking immunological cardiovascular, system that basically is a modal system that can actually nurture, treat this child with kind of marvel that, is beyond, again, our comprehension, the magic that is existence, that is us.
The incredible gift of life. And as the author of all life, God, why wouldn't we want to communicate with Him now? Why wouldn't we want to enter into that relationship? And when He said at one point, very early on, when the child says, I'm here to stay. In my mom's womb, I'm here to stay. I'm not going anywhere. I'm here to stay. Why wouldn't we want to be here, to be in a relationship with God? So powerful, so beautiful. I have an uncle. My uncle suffered a severe heart attack a number of years ago, 2000, I believe. And he survived the heart attack. And then he went on this diet, I think called Dean Hornish, am I right? Something like that. And there was actually these classes that he was in with some people. And he was in a class with an African American woman who came up to him and said, "Child, how much time a day do you spend in prayer?" And he said, "I don't know, a minute or two." And she said, "Well, boy, child, you're in big trouble." When I was in business, I would travel to a town called Greenville, South Carolina, frequently. I enjoy Greenville a lot. And a magazine that I believe it's called Greenville Magazine, or Business Magazine. It's a Greenville business magazine. And they often do run profiles of more prominent people in the city and in that region of the state. But here's one they did, and I'd like to share a portion of this article, of a woman named Miss Flory Hill. Miss Flory Hill, who is the owner and operator of M&T Laundry and More. And these are her words. My life is not easy. In fact, it is rough. I could quit. I could lie down and let the world run right over me, but that's not who I am. It works better for me to count my blessings rather than spend my time and energy focusing on all my troubles. Everybody's got problems. I am no religious fanatic, but here's what I do. I get up at 4:30 a.m. and spend an hour in prayer, meditation, reading the Bible, and other devotional books. Sometimes I listen to gospel music. It centers me for the rest of the day. I listen to the Spirit, get direction for the day. It works for me. I love doing laundry. In fact, I am passionate about it. People have a hard time believing that, but it is something I have always done and I thoroughly enjoy it. As a small child, my mother took me with her to clean other people's houses. While Mama did the heavy cleaning, she put me on the ironing board. I loved it then, and I have never stopped loving it. When I'm ironing, I'm in hog heaven. Look at that basket of clothes sitting there, all jumbled up, disgusting, dirty mess. But when I finish with them, cleaning, drying, ironing, and folding them in my special way, they will look like they could march out of here. I wish other messes in life could be cleaned up so easily. Talk about a sense of accomplishment. I have it every time I take a mess like that and make something beautiful out of it. This is my gift. I get up every day and do exactly what I enjoy the most. Nothing makes me happy. We all have gifts. But the richest man in the world, living in the finest house money can buy, has nothing on me. I feel complete. I figured out that the best way for me to survive is by doing exactly what I most enjoy. There is nothing anyone could give me that could make me happy. That's what works for her. 4:30 a.m. May not work for all of us, but that's what works for this one very humble woman owner of a local laundromat in Greenville, South Carolina. If you're ever down there, go visit her. First day of school, just a few weeks ago, over at Butler Catholic, I was there. And one of the younger ones, everyone was gathering in the gymnasium, and sitting on the bleachers. First day, kids are excited, kids are jittery. Well, one of the younger ones, a kindergartner, was sitting there in the front row, despondent. Her head was like this. Just a look of concern on his face. I said, "Tyler, what's the matter? You look upset." He goes, looking through his book bag, "I forgot my agenda." Kindergarten. God is agenda. And how agenda-driven are we, huh? But how agenda-less prayer can be. We don't have to have an agenda. Remember that. It's not so much about what we are doing. It's about what the Lord is doing. Oftentimes people will come up to me and say, "Father, I'm trying so hard. in my prayer life. I'm trying so hard in my spiritual life. And I just don't feel it. I don't feel like I'm getting anywhere. Don't try so hard. My guess is that many of you probably have far healthier spiritual lives than you realize. It's probably already there. And you're trying too hard. Anthony de Mello was a pretty famous Jesuit priest in the 20th century, especially in the 1970s. And he would tell a bunch of little parable stories to get his point across. And this is one called The Little Fish. "Excuse me," said an ocean fish. "You are older than I. So, can you tell me where to find this thing they call the ocean?" "The ocean," said the older fish, "is the thing you are in now." "Oh, this?" said the little fish. "But this is water. What I'm seeking is the ocean." As the disappointed little fish swam away to search elsewhere, the big fish said in return, "Stop searching, little fish. There isn't anything to look for. All you have to do is look." Father Lester Knoll, whom many of you know, he's a hometown local boy and has a beautiful family here, a beautiful number of family members here in Butler. Miriam played with us as one of the family members. Bob Shakley, who spoke with us last year, married into the family. Father Lester Knoll was my spiritual director for a number of years in the seminary, and I just happened to see him a few months ago, earlier in the summer. He published a book. He had a book signing up in Herman, St. Mary's Parish. And it was in June, and I said, Father, when I had a few moments to speak with him, I said, "Father Lester, I've been blessed these last few months. I've had some incredibly beautiful experiences these last few months that I can't explain. It started in May with the end of the school year, being with the kids, the 8th graders from Butler Catholic, and I had some beautiful moments with those students, incredible moments with those students that we shared together. And it extended on into June when I was in Italy. And then even while we were returning, so many of you know, we heard that my Uncle Al had passed away. And upon our return then, entering into that moment with my family at the funeral home, at the funeral, which was celebrated at Assumption Parish in Bellevue, Pennsylvania, and then extended beyond there. So they weren't all easy moments, but they were blessed moments. And when I mentioned that to Father Lester, he just casually looked at me and said, "The Lord is well pleased with you. You are being blessed." Duh. It's that simple. Why are you looking so hard? It's that simple. That's prayer. A recognition of that is entering into union with the divine now. And every once in a while we just need reminded by wise people like Father Lester. We all have access to these moments, my friends. We all do. It's not just religious. It's not just priests. Before I was a priest, before I even entered seminary, I had two very powerful, very real, spiritual, and I will call them Eucharistic moments. So as Catholics, we have the Eucharist. Rodney spoke of it. The true presence of Jesus. Right there for us. There for us to receive, and there for us to adore. One of my sisters, Nadine, my youngest sister, she got married first. She was the first one to get married in the family. And she got married at Assumption Church in Bellevue. So that is a church that is very deep with my family. Just like many of you here. So many of you here have roots so deep at our three parishes, or whatever parish you might be from. But I know here in Butler, We go back generations. The roots are deep. Well, that's like this at Assumption Parish for my family. So it's during my sister's wedding, and she had a wedding mass. You don't necessarily have to have a mass for the wedding. You can have a ceremony, but she had a wedding mass. And I was in the wedding party, and I remember my brother-in-law's mom was in front of me. I don't know why. That's the way that we were seated, but for some reason she was in front of me. Maybe she was behind me, but she was near me. Such a Eucharistic moment. And it was at the time where Nadine and Kelly, her husband, were kneeling. They were kneeling in front of the altar, and the priest, who was Father Matt McLean, who lives with us now, was celebrating Mass. And it was a time where he elevated the Eucharist. The Eucharist was already consecrated. He elevates the Eucharist. And it just hit me. Wow. My sister's getting married in this beautiful church that means so much to my family. And here's Jesus in the Eucharist. And I started crying. I was evidently visibly crying because my brother-in-law's mother taps me on the shoulder and says, "Why are you crying?" "Shouldn't you be?" I'm thinking, "Why are you crying? Your son's getting married." I probably cried more than my mother that day. It was one of those beautiful Eucharistic sacramental moments for me. My sister was receiving the sacrament of marriage. We all were receiving the sacrament of Eucharist, those of us who could. I cried. I didn't cry at all my ordination day. I cried at her wedding day. Who knows? You never know. But I'll take it. That was well before I was even in the seminary. We vacation, we haven't for a while, but our family would go to Hilton Head Island, like many Western Pennsylvanians. And one year we stayed at a house that was nearby the church. I think it's Holy Family Church. Hilton Head. And I found out that they had Eucharistic adoration there every morning, just like we have adoration here in our chapel, right here at St. Mike's. So I would get up early and walk down to the church and sit in adoration for a little while. And there was one day, and I distinctly remember this day, this particular day, years ago, more than any other day I've ever been in Eucharistic adoration, just sitting there with our Lord in this small chapel in Hilton Head Island, South Carolina. Beautiful weather, 100-degree humidity. It saps you as soon as you walk out the door. On vacation, for crying out loud. I should be at the beach, at the pool, be with my family, be golfing, playing tennis, riding bikes. That's what I should be doing. But I found myself in adoration, and I didn't want to leave. I didn't want to be anywhere else. I just wanted to stay there. I didn't want to be golfing. Who goes to Hilton Head and doesn't golf? If you're a golfer. Or play tennis. I had no incentive to play tennis at that moment. I had no incentive to be with anybody else. Those who I love the most. I just want to stay there with Jesus. That's not me doing the work. That's the Lord, like a magnetic force, just keeping me there. That author of life. Why wouldn't we want to stay there? In His beautiful presence. I haven't had that feeling since. Not that strong. But that's okay. That was God's gift to me that day, in that moment. All we have to do is look. John Paul II. St. John Paul II. St. John Paul the Great. He has a bunch of titles. It was incredibly known for powerful prayer. Entering into very, very, very deep prayer. And he says this. He was pretty demanding. He says this. It is not enough for Catholics to receive the Eucharist. one must also contemplate it. Man achieves the fullness of prayer not when he expresses himself again, but when he lets God be most fully present in prayer. It's not enough to receive the Eucharist, one must also contemplate it. That's adoration. He would encourage people to get before the Blessed Sacrament. And if they couldn't, he would ask them to have a moment of private Blessed Sacrament presence in our hearts. Again, a one-on-one time. Now, John Paul II loved to pray also in the outdoors, amongst nature and creation. And I know a number of people like to do that. When they're out for a walk, take a rosary and pray. Let's keep the phones at home. Keep them in the car. Take a chance that an emergency won't happen within those 20 minutes or half hour. And just be with the Lord in creation. Some people even use exercise even further when they go for a run as prayer. I can't when I run. When I'm running, I'm sucking wind so much, I'm like, Lord, why am I doing this? That's my prayer. But some people like to enter into prayer when they're out exercising. So here's a neat article just about that. It's from the magazine Runner's World. Written by a gal first named Kristen. She talks about her marathon experience here. Striving to qualify for the Boston Marathon. She says, while at the Dallas White Rock Marathon 2 years ago, I ran to push through the pain of my divorce. And in the New York City Marathon, I still had some residual dust. But this time, when I reached inside to grab hold of something, my hand came out empty. Inside, I was peaceful. Inspiration had to come from someplace else, and so it did. I heard of a runner who made a marathon prayer list of 26 people and dedicated a mile to each person. The only thing I didn't like about this idea was that I hadn't thought of it myself. Paige, my friend Paige and I consolidated our prayer lists, and beside each mile marker on her pace band was a split time and the names of family members or friends. We dedicated an early mile to a couple struggling with their marriage. One for our coach Cassie, one for our brothers. As our prayers and miles intensified, our talking subsided. The silence between us grew as we pressed on with miles for our parents, for Paige's husband Jamil, for my children's father Lance, and for Eric, the new man in my life who was waiting for me at the finish line. Our goal was to run a 3-hour, 40-minute marathon, my qualifying time for Boston. When Paige and I travel to these races together, I'm in charge of hotel and dinner reservations, and Paige is the boss of race day. This day, she also announced the names of the people we were running for each mile. I'd like to describe the scenery, the rush of 1 million spectators, and the special points of interest along the marathon route, but I didn't see a thing. Running each mile for somebody else made the mile markers fly by. Paige and I dedicated the last 6 miles to each of our 3 children. There isn't a more powerful passion or greater inspiration for moms like us. And so together, we ran my first negative split race. I had never felt this good in a race, ever. At mile 25, I felt a hitch in my calf and a sudden wave of fear. Paige shouted, "Lane!" And we began her oldest daughter's mile. Lane wears a leg brace and can't quite straighten out her left calf muscle, so she tippy-toes on one side. I thought of Lane and the way she held my finger 6 years ago in the hospital's intensive care unit, where she weighed just 3 pounds. I thought of her last February, wearing a cast that had unraveled in the rain, fiercely slogging through puddles to complete her first 1K race. I thought of all the ways, subtle and profound, that I have been blessed in the past 3 years. I didn't run this race for myself because I didn't need to. Race day was a gift from God, showing me what happens when I learn to trust, learn to quit striving, and relax my way into being me. A true self has to be inhabited, not coerced. I am a new woman, and I ran like one. Qualifying for Boston. Not bad for a slacker. Woman's last name is Armstrong. Lance Armstrong is her ex-husband. She's a Catholic as well. I mentioned spiritual direction, and I'll finish up with just a few more items. We have financial advisors, personal trainers, coaches, tutors in school. What about spiritual directors? Do we have anybody to help us direct our spiritual lives? And it's different than counseling. Spiritual direction is different than counseling. Every priest and religious is strongly suggested to have a spiritual director to go to regularly, to keep you in line, to challenge you. Men and women alike are spiritual directors. So if you're serious about your spiritual life and you want spiritual direction, go see the Capuchins in Harmony. No, I mean, I think a lot of people do not come to parish priests, diocesan priests, because they think they're too busy. Or I think there's a stigma of the term secular priest is what we are called. Us diocesan priests, I don't like that term. Secular priest. Almost like, well, you're not really that holy, you just do sacraments. You're just there to do Mass for us and hear confessions and baptize, and then you go on. And that's it. Well, no, I know a number of diocesan priests that are open to guiding people in spiritual direction if they're serious about their spiritual lives and want to be challenged in spiritual direction. Reading good books, good spiritual books. I somewhere put a list of books in the back on one of the tables nearest the doors. Just brief, again, a non-exhaustive list of good spiritual reading that I have come across. And maybe through those books, if you read any of them, they will lead you to other books. Read good stuff. Read good spiritual stuff. It's a great way to pray. To enter into prayer. Through journaling. Some people keep journals. That's a form of prayer. Again, prayer is a dialogue, a relationship, a conversation, a running conversation with God. Imaginative prayer. One of the books I listed on the sheet, the Bible. The best way that I found to read the Bible is to subscribe to a publication called a Magnificat, which gives us the daily readings that we find at Mass every single day of the year. It's a yearly subscription. That's the best way to read the Bible. Trying to start it from Genesis and finish at Revelation, God bless you if you can do it. But we read along with the Church's rhythm of life when we read, and Magnificat's not the only publication. There are other publications. I think one is called Word Among Us. And there are other good publications that follow the daily readings. And we can follow along Scripture that way. And use our imaginations. Imaginative prayer. I've talked about it a little bit in the past. Put yourself in the scene of the Scripture. Right in the middle of it. It requires time. Yes, it requires some one-on-one time with Jesus. It's not easy. One of the things reading Father Lester's book, and which is one of the books I have on the sheet, is that sometimes prayer can be exhausting. John Paul II was like that. So often when he would come out of prayer, he would be tired and exhausted. Sometimes it's nourishing. Again, like any other relationship that we have, sometimes you're exhausted in that relationship. Sometimes you are nourished by that relationship. But in this relationship, it is with the Almighty creator of life. And lastly, artwork. I'm not a big artist. I don't know anything about art. But this portrait, which I will hopefully be able to just focus on, and we will finish quietly with that before our final song. This portrait is called The Prince of Peace. And it was painted by an 8-year-old girl named Akiani Kramaric, who was raised in an atheistic family. No exposure to God as a child, but claims that she had dreams and inspirations, and evidently an awful lot of talent, to paint divine work. This portrait of Jesus, which doesn't come across as powerfully as it does in an original form or on a small screen, is the most captivating portrait of Christ that I have come across. It works for me. What I've been doing since I came across this painting is pray this painting. Every night before I go to bed, I stare into the eyes of Jesus. I use my imagination, longing and yearning to be with Him, now and forever. If Jesus is the center of our lives and the center of the universe and center of all time, why wouldn't we desire to be with Him in prayer in this life?